Everybody, welcome to HackerKast. As always, I'm with Robert Hansen and Matt Johansen, and we're going to talk to you today about current events in application security. It's for everybody out there that can't spend their entire lives studying this stuff like we do. We're gluttons for punishment. What can we say? And we kind of punished ourselves last week with some research Robert put out there on North Korea's web browser. What was the name of their browser?
Nanera.
Nanera. So you took it upon yourself to download RedStar OS and rip apart their browser and blog it. And apparently we learned a few things, and people liked your post, and in all the traffic, it crashed our blog. So I guess that's a good thing. In some ways.
We had the Reddit hug of death.
But we did learn some interesting stuff about their browsers, old school Firefox. We learned some stuff about how North Korea's internet must be architected. Maybe not the whole thing, but a lot about it was really cool stuff if you hadn't seen it.
Yeah, it's fun, kind of.
And yeah, IT wasn't pleased with us, so they were running around trying to fix the blog. So we finally got that up and operational again, so that's good. All right, let's get to the stories. It looks like these days, we've had some not so good things in the news lately, but apparently the governments of the world, or especially in this case the UK, is trying to ban encrypted applications, meaning those that give good, strong communications encryption, like WhatsApp and iMessage. They're looking at banning this stuff by law. If they can't read it, they ban it. What are you guys thinking about this?
Well, so the UK government just came out with some proposed legislation to block half dozen different things that they think are potential encryption technologies that they can't read. But meanwhile, Iran, almost the exact same time, said they're blocking something called Line, WhatsApp, and Tango, which for the exact same reasons, by the way, not even like for different reasons. They both say they can't read it, so therefore you've got to block it. And ironically, it's both about national security. So they're both like, UK is like, they hate our freedom so much that we've got to break all of our freedoms and read all this content. It really is bizarre. Totally half-baked idea, and it really. The really bad part is people who actually need strong crypto for actual security purposes won't be able to use it. So I can't think of a worse idea coming from the government. Totally somebody who doesn't understand technology.
Reactionary, right? It's just reactionary. It's like, oh, well, we need to do something. Let's do this, and we're going to make an entire industry illegal.
It's funny. Like, there's lots of bad ideas that make their way into legislation, but this one, I just can't imagine how one goes about regulating math.
I mean, we kind of do that even to the day with like ITAR. Like certain types of crypto, you're not supposed to export. They're under export control. You're not supposed to export them to verboten countries like Iran, and
it didn't work. It just didn't work.
Yeah, it didn't work. People were like smuggling it out in tattoos and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So we got blocked apps for secure communication, but we also had an interesting story. It was an Instagram vulnerability. I guess Facebook owns Instagram, and then amazingly, private photos aren't exactly private when you put them in the cloud. So what's going on here, Matt?
Yeah. So it turns out if you don't want everyone to see stuff, just don't put it on the internet.
What?
It just turns out that that's great advice, right? So yeah, Instagram. This is just a really quick. I guess it's a logic flaw, which we kind of like, Jer, right?
Yeah.
So if you ever put a picture on Instagram and it was marked as public anytime in the past, even if you switch your account to private, which should theoretically make none of your photos publicly accessible, unless by people that you have chosen. If you ever marked your account as private, it turns out that they weren't private. If you started as public, you could still link to these things. So it was more of a security by obscurity now, right? Because now if they didn't have the link to the photo to begin with, then they can't get back to it. But if they did have the link to the photo, then it was still publicly accessible. So
I guess you call that insufficient authorization, I guess?
Yeah, yes, it would fall under that for sure. And then maybe some sort of predictable directory type thing if you could start guessing public URLs of photos and whatever, right? But
I mean, PhotoBucket's had this same exact issue multiple times, so it's hard if you make something public and then try to pull it back. It actually is kind of a complex flow of logic to decide when to allow it, especially if you have like different ways to access the same thing, like one through a direct URL, one through sort of reference to that URL, and people visiting it through a totally different interface or whatever.
So so the Instagram gets the award this week for the easy vuln. Now let's go to the slightly more complicated and new stuff. So we got something called cross-site content hijacking POC. The acronym, as if web security needed another acronym, XSCH. I don't know how to pronounce that, but what is this thing?
Yeah, I haven't had a whole lot of chance to look into it. It actually does many different things, actually, so that's why it'll take some time to dig in. But apparently, among many other things, it might have the ability to send arbitrary HTTP headers cross-domain, like referring URL. And if that's true, things like Django's anti-cross-site request forgery filter do use referring URL as an indicator about whether you're on the right domain to be sending content as sort of a primary cross-site request forgery defense, which I've always thought was sort of half good and half bad, but in this case it could actually be extremely easy to bypass if you've got some other vuln that allows you to get that nonce.
The refer checking for CSRF protection has always been at the bottom of the potential CSRF protections that I've suggested. It's if you absolutely cannot do anything else, at least do refer checking. But yeah, I mean, there was flash vulns that could bypass that. I mean, there's tons of ways to spoof refer headers.
Well, in the history, I do remember a lot of systems out there using custom headers to block cross-site request forgery stuff. They would just, in an XHR request, they would just put a token in a custom header and do it that way. But what we also know about browser security is that the browser guys went to great lengths to make sure you couldn't modify certain headers cross-domain or even on-domain, like not refer, not host, not user agent, and things like that. So if this attack here allows us to do cross-site modification of those or addition of those, that's not so good. That's going to be pretty powerful.
Yeah, it's pretty nasty. Look forward to looking into this more.
Yeah, I think it involves some PDF stuff. So yeah, it will take some work to dig into it.
Okay, so we got the Instagram easy, we got the cross-site content hijacking hard, and we got something kind of in the middle. We got this thing from Amazon. People are leaving their S3 keys in their GitHub repositories. In this particular case, it was used to mine a few thousand bitcoins. That I thought was pretty clever.
That's cool.
Yeah, this has actually been happening for quite a while now. Our friends over at Securosis, Rich Mogul, actually came out and publicly. Jerry, you did this too, and when you pwned yourself by forgetting your password, you kind of come out and you try to do a lessons learned for everybody, and I think that's really cool. And Rich did this, it was either last year or sometime, I can't remember. It was a while ago though, and the same thing. It's a really easy thing to do because even if you don't have it in the master branch of your repository that's going into production, right? If you're using GitHub or some other Bitbucket or something like that. You have all these other alternative branches of code that you've been working on and tinkering with and have your API keys in, and all these other things. And if those just get synced up there, even if they don't make their way into your master branch, that's it. Your keys to your kingdom are still up on GitHub. And the really cool thing, though, that both GitHub and Amazon do is actually troll around searching for common terms to try to see if people do this. They will actually alert you and say, hey, you have this variable called Amazon whatever key, right? Or they can, do some regex matching on the actual key, and if it matches it and whatever, and they'll actually notify you, hey, you put this up there and you shouldn't have. I can't remember if that's how Rich found out or not, but same exact thing happened to Rich, was that they went in and started trying to mine bitcoins on his account. He just caught it a little faster, so they didn't get a few thousand. So apparently this is happening pretty widespread, and like I said, it's an easy thing to do, so I assume it's probably pretty successful. I don't know if I've ever heard of it getting to a few thousand bitcoins, though. That takes a serious long time of pwnage, and I feel like the Amazon bills would have gone up a significant amount. Even if you have no logging or any security in your EC2 account or whatever it is, like you get the bill in the mail for a few $1,000 of computer hours and bandwidth that you need.
It's pretty funny. Your Amazon bill or your invoice functions as your intrusion detection system. It's probably not the best thing to have it for, but it works.
It just occurred to me that it's a little weird that Amazon allows provisioning of servers through their API all the time. Like, can you turn that off? You know, it seems like that would be something you'd really very rarely want to do. Like, is that something you really need to have inside your?
Not really. With continuous integration nowadays, that's like the new hotness, man. You want to spin up a server via an API and spin them down, spin them up.
That seems very scary. And more importantly, shouldn't you be able to have limits on that and say, I only want to be able to spin up, I don't know, 5% more than I normally do at any given time? Or
but they're not spinning up a number of boxes. They're spinning up one beefy or two beefy boxes and then installing Bitcoin miners on them. That's what happened to Rich, at least.
I think this other one was more than that.
Okay, so I mean, it's super interesting. The fact that they got a few thousand Bitcoins out of it is super cool, though.
What's the guidance here? You're using Amazon, you're using GitHub. What's the guidance here, you know, the best practice for this not to happen to you?
Even when you're coding, you really should never be hard coding these kinds of keys into your code, period. These things should live in environmental variable land, maybe, or somewhere else, but it's really, you know, you really just should never be coding these into files, even in development. I know it's the east, it's the path of least resistance.
Do you pull them out of local config files that are outside the repository, maybe?
Yeah. Never touch the repo, right? If they're on the server, they're environmental variables, stuff like that. If you have to do it, you got to make sure that they don't end up in the repo when you sync up to the cloud, right? If you're doing it in a dev branch and that dev branch, you know, just stays local, then okay, cool. You're proving a concept and you're building the code that actually matters instead of worrying about the plumbing. And I understand that, but you got it. Like, it's hard. Like I said, it's an easy thing to do. Someone like Rich, he's one of the most security-centric guys. Writes all sorts of stuff about Amazon EC2 security.
He's very careful too.
Yeah, and it just happens in these other branches, and yeah, I can see myself doing the same thing. And
mistakes happen. We learn from it. We get on with it. I guess that's why checklists are key.
Yep.
Absolutely.
That's why I like that Amazon and GitHub troll around for it, and that they know that it's a problem, and they're kind of monitoring for it and alerting. That's really cool.
All right, let's cover one more story. This one's got to be our personal favorite, right? You know, let's read this headline here. Kid hacks into school website to shame them for making them go to school when the roads were covered in snow. I mean, that's like right up there with hacking to change your grades. I mean, this just keeps happening. And we would like to show the screenshots, but they're not exactly G-rated here. But the whole story covered in Gawker was pretty funny.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's as old as hacking, really, you know, or hacking anything. People want to get out of school.
Probably the first hack I ever did was like print something in the library while I'm sitting in the computer lab because I VNC'd in or something like that. Yeah, kids at school are bored and play with computers. Yeah.
This one has caused no damage, though. It was kind of interesting. It was very subtle. I mean, unless you really were paying attention to the alert, because there is an alert,
yeah.
but unless you're really paying attention to it, you just probably gloss right over it, wouldn't even notice. In fact, I'm surprised anyone really did.
So what blogging system do you suppose he hacked?
Good question. I didn't even look at the URL.
Give you 1.5 guesses.
WordPress or Joomla?
Or Drupal, come on. Give it
Drupal, yeah. You know, it's kind of amazing. Like, you know, these blogging platforms are so incredibly popular, but there's the same systems are just riddled with vulns. And, you know, maybe the cores are getting better, but man, they get the core secure, and then all the hacks end up being in the plugins.
Yeah.
So this week we're still doing the current events, but next week we're going to start doing a lot more you know, simple demos and things like that. You know, intro to cross-site scripting, little hacks in here and there that people might have forgot existed. You know, we've been doing this web security stuff for a long time, doing the top 10 web hacking techniques thing. So we're collecting those now. But you know, if you go back in all those early hacks, you know, a lot of the little techniques, those all still work, but people forget about them. No one has recorded them. So we're going to start doing that stuff. It's going to be pretty fun.
And the industry needs talent, and there's got to be people that are looking for this kind of stuff all the time, just trying to learn. And give us your feedback. If you guys are listening to this, if you want more current events, if you want more hacks, if you want whatever, tweet us, email us, whatever it is. We're open for suggestions and happy to try to record some cool stuff for you guys.
Absolutely.
Right on. Guys, talk to you later, and see you next week.
Peace out.
See you, Jared.